I live in a town where everyone just ignores you unless you're doing something wrong. There aren't a lot of places to go, especially when you're under 21, and the library is one of the only buildings that's still open past 8. I'd been there for a while and was waiting for my bus, which was already running late, and I didn't feel like standing outside in the wind. I grabbed a random book from the local history shelf because it was closest to the chairs. When I opened it, a piece of paper slid out and landed on my boot. It wasn't a bookmark. The paper was thin and yellow, like it was pulled from an old notebook, and it was folded perfectly in half. When I opened it, I saw a single sentence written in pen. "You're not the first to find this." Underneath, in smaller writing, was a call number. I told myself it was a joke, someone's idea of a scavenger hunt, but still, I took the stairs and followed the number. The next book was on the second floor, in the oversized section. It was already sticking out slightly, like someone had pulled it and changed their mind. Inside was another note. This one was newer. The handwriting was different, rounder and heavier. "Thank you for coming. East wall, bottom shelf." The east wall was the children's section. I crouched and flipped through a few books until I found the next note tucked between pages of a picture book. This one was written in pencil. "It helps that you're alone. See you in the basement." That was the first line that made my stomach drop. I don't know why. The basement level of the library is where they keep records and the microfilm machines. It's quiet with no windows. I told myself I'd go down, look, and leave. Most of the smaller rooms were locked because you had to reserve them in advance. I didn't see anything at the bottom of the stairs, and the records room was empty. There was no way I was going to start going through drawers or filing cabinets. I was about to shrug it off and head out to check on the bus again, when I noticed a piece of paper taped to a map on the wall in the back of the room. It had to be unrelated, I assumed, but it wouldn't hurt to check. The paper was older than any of the others. The ink was faded. "You've gone farther than most." My heart sped up. At the bottom of the note was an arrow pointing to the corner, so I took the paper from the wall and looked at the back. Closed stacks, end desk. The closed stacks aren't open to the public, but the door isn't locked during business hours, so the staff can go in and out. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, then pushed the door open. The desk at the end of the stacks was bare, except for a pen and a stack of cards. They weren't notes. They were old checkout slips, the kind libraries used before computers. Cardstock with stamped dates and handwritten names. I picked one up and read the name. Then I flipped through the stack. It was the same name on every card. My name. All with different dates, but the same writing. My writing. The last card was blank, except for today's date printed at the top. The pen was uncapped. The library's closing announcement echoed faintly through the building, reminding patrons to bring their materials to the desk. I don't remember deciding to sit down. I don't remember writing, but when I looked down, my name was on the card. I suddenly wanted to be anywhere else, so I snuck out of the room to the lobby, where I saw the headlights of the bus coming from down the road. Snow was falling like nothing had happened. I caught the bus and headed home. When I took off my jacket, something slipped out of the pocket and landed on the floor. A folded piece of paper in my handwriting. You're not the first to find this. Something happened 63 years ago that's haunted me my entire life. I've never told anyone about it until now. It's official. I'm an old man. For the last couple years, I've comforted myself by saying I'm in my early 70s. But math is simple and unforgiving. Today is my 75th birthday, and God, the years do fly. I'm not here for your well wishes. This is hardly a milestone I'm excited about. I'm glad to still be here, of course, but I find I have less and less to live for with every passing year. My bones ache, my kids live far away, and the other side of my bed has been empty for over 8 months now. So spare me your happy birthdays and your congratulations, if you please. I'm here because I have a story for you, and it's one I've never told before. I used to think I kept it inside because it was silly, or because nobody would believe it. I have found, though, that the older you grow, the more exhausting it becomes to lie to yourself. If I'm being completely honest, I've never told anybody this story because it scares me to death. But death seems friendlier than it used to. So listen close. The year was 1950, the setting a small town in Maine. I was a boy of 9, rather small for my age, with only one friend in the world to speak of, and his family, seemingly on a whim, decided to move 2,000 miles away. It was shaping up to be the worst summer of my life. I wasn't apt to hang around the house. With some hesitation, I decided the public library was the place to be that summer. The collection of books, particularly children's books, was meager to say the least. But within those walls, I would find no undone chores, no nagging mother, God rest her soul, and perhaps most importantly, no other children with whom I would be expected to associate. I was the only kid with a low enough social status to spend his precious days of freedom sulking amid the bookshelves, and that was just fine with me. The first half of my summer was even more dreadful than I had imagined it would be. I would sleep in until about 10, do my chores, then ride my bike to the library. Once there, I would split my time between unintentionally annoying the elderly patrons and deliberately doing so. One pleasant lady actually interrupted my incessant tongue-clicking to tell me to shut up. The dreary days turned to woeful weeks. I had actually begun praying for school to start again, until I discovered the basement. I could have sworn I'd roamed every inch of that library, but one day, in the far corner behind the foreign language collection, I stumbled across a small wooden door I had never seen before. And that was where it all began. The door was windowless and made from oak that looked far older than the wall in which it rested. It had a knob of black metal that quite literally looked ancient. I wouldn't be surprised to learn it was crafted in the 17th century. Engraved on the knob was what appeared to be a single footprint. I had the sense that whatever lay beyond this door was forbidden to me, and therefore, probably the most interesting thing I would encounter all summer. I glanced around to make sure nobody was watching, then turned the heavy knob, slipped behind the door, and shut it. There was nothing, only darkness. I took a couple of steps and stopped, unnerved by the totality of the shadow that surrounded me. I waved my hands around in an attempt to find a wall or shelf to hold on to, and found a small string dangling from above. I grabbed it firmly and pulled it down. My surroundings were instantly illuminated. I was standing on a small, dusty platform that looked as though it hadn't seen life in quite some time. To my left was a crickety-ass spiral staircase made of wood and appearing ready to collapse at any second. The light bulb was the only source of light in the room, so when I peered over the railing to see what lay below, the bottom of the stairs dissolved into darkness. I was beginning to feel scared. This place, wherever I was, seemed to have no business in a town library. It was as though I were in a completely different building. But no 9-year-old likes to let a mystery go unsolved. Looking back, I wish I could tell my prepubescent self to turn around, go back, do anything else besides descending that staircase. You'll be spared a lot of sleepless nights, I would say. But of course, I didn't know that then, and I may not have listened, even if I had. So instead of turning back, I took a deep breath, gripped the railing, and glared resolutely forward as I began my descent. The wood on the railing was dry and covered with splinters. I immediately let go, holding my hands out for balance as I carefully traversed the staircase. It was, or at least seemed to be, very long, and with only the dim glow from the string bulb far above me, my heart pounded mercilessly in the darkness. Even kids can sense when something isn't right, I think. They just don't always give a shit. By the time my feet reached the cement floor at the bottom, the light from above was very nearly a memory. But there was a new light source, and God, I'll never forget it. Directly in front of me was a door, massive and a deep shade of red. The light was coming from behind the door, and it shone out in thin lines from all 4 sides. A sinister, dimly glowing rectangle. For the second time, I took a deep breath and went through a door I shouldn't have. In contrast to the dark room I entered from, the room behind the door was blinding. When my eyes adjusted, what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was a library. The most perfect library imaginable. It was smaller than the library I'd come from, but it seemed to be almost tailor-made for me. The shelves were packed with brightly colored titles. Both armchairs in the middle of the room were exquisitely comfortable, And the smell, my God, the smell was simply unbelievable. Sort of a mixture of citrus and pine. I simply cannot do it justice with words, so I'll suffice it to say that I've never smelled anything better, not in my 75 years. I was intoxicated. As I gazed around at all the books and basked in the smell of paradise, I could only form one thought. I will never be bored again. In truth, boredom only hid from me for about 3 years. It was my 12th birthday that everything changed. Before then, I visited my basement sanctuary as often as I could, usually several times a week. I never saw another soul down there, yet strangely remained free of suspicion. I never removed a book from that room, but instead would pick up a volume whenever I stopped reading during my previous visit. I sat always in the same deep purple armchair, and always leaving its twin barren directly across from myself. One armchair was mine, and the other was, well, I suppose I couldn't have articulated it then much better than I can now. But it wasn't mine, that's for damn sure. On my 12th birthday, I arrived later than usual. My mom invited a couple classmates and cousins to our house to celebrate, a gesture that I found more tedious than touching. Really, I just wanted to spend my birthday sitting and reading and smelling paradise. Eventually, the guests went home, and I made it to the library about 15 minutes before closing time. That didn't matter. The workers never checked the basement before they locked up. I was free to stay as late as I wished. This particular night, I was devouring the final chapters of an epic adventure. Knights, swords, dragons, and the like. I didn't smell it until I read the final words and closed the book. The once exquisite aroma of that room had turned sour. I sat for a moment, unsettled. Objectively, I could recognize that the smell was actually the same as it had been before. A mixture of citrus and pine. I just perceived it differently, and I didn't like it anymore. It was like a form of optical illusion. The spell was broken. The odor, for the first time, seemed to be coming from somewhere specific. With a fair amount of trepidation, I stalked around the room, sniffing the air like a crazed canine, until I came to a shelf near the back. The shelf was perfectly normal, with the exception of one title, a large, leather-bound cover of solid faded maroon, with one striking black footprint at the top of the spine. This was the source of the smell. I opened the front cover and saw one sentence scrawled neatly in blood-red ink atop the first page. Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie. I stared at that sentence, mesmerized, as I began to retreat to my chair. I turned the page. Blank. The smell became stronger. Another page. Blank. And the smell grew stronger still. I stopped for a moment, suppressing a gag, and continued walking. As I neared the armchairs, I turned one final page, and there, in the same sinister print, was the last thing I expected to see. My own name. I dropped the book. I began to sprint toward the door, but as I shifted my gaze forward, I stopped in my tracks. The other chair wasn't empty anymore. An aged man in a suit sat before me, one leg crossed over the other, contemplating me with piercing gray eyes and a light smirk. I fell to my knees and expelled the contents of my stomach onto the carpet, and I heard the man let out a chuckle. He leapt to his feet and touched me gently on the shoulder before helping me to my chair. "I fear we got off to a bad start," he said. "The smell, it does take some getting used to." I stared at him disbelievingly. "Who are you?" "Tonight, you will know hardship like you've never known before," he said. "I come as a friend, offering you refuge from all other storms which lie ahead." I asked him what he was talking about. "Your mother is dead, my boy, by her own hand in her kitchen. The scene is gruesome, I must admit. Surely you wish to avoid this path. I can show you a safer one." My blood ran cold, but I did not believe him. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The man laughed. "Nothing but your friendship, dear boy," he said. "I want you to come on a journey with me. My work is noble, and you will make a fine apprentice. And maybe, when I'm done," he sighed tiredly, running his bony fingers through his thin white hair, "maybe my work can be yours." I stood up, shuffling toward the door but never breaking his gaze. "You're crazy," I told him. "My mom isn't dead. She's not." "See for yourself if you must," he said, gesturing toward the door. I bolted for the exit, and as my hand closed around the knob, the man said my name softly. In spite of myself, I turned around. "The road won't be easy, friend, if it ever becomes too much for you, and I mean ever. You know where to find me." I slammed the door behind me and took the stairs 2 at a time. I exited the library, clambered onto my bike, and hightailed it home. The front door was wide open. I dismounted, leaving my bike in a heap on the ground, and approached the house cautiously. The old man was lying. I knew he was. But still, tears began to sting my eyes. Heart pounding, I stepped inside and called for my mother. I heard no answer, so I turned to the kitchen. To this day, I don't know why she did it. I lived in that small town in Maine my entire life, though I've kept mostly clear of that public library. Once, in my late 20s, I summoned the courage to step back inside. Life was good at that time, and my fear had morphed into curiosity. Where the door to my basement sanctuary once stood was now only a blank wall. I asked the librarian what had become of the basement, though in my heart I knew the answer. "There was no basement," she said. "There had never been a basement." I've been haunted by that sickly sweet smell that poisonous blend of citrus and pine, ever since that long ago birthday. When I saw my mother in the kitchen that day, collapsed in a pool of her own blood, I smelled it. When a man claiming to be my father knocked on my college apartment door to beg me for money and threatened to beat me within an inch of my life if I refused, I smelled it. When my wife miscarried our second child, I smelled it. And again when she miscarried our fourth. When our oldest son got behind the wheel of the family Buick, completely shit-faced, and got his girlfriend killed, I smelled it. I began to smell it again as my wife became sick. She died late last year, and now I'm all alone for the first time in more than half a century. Now, I smell it every day, and it feels like an invitation. A few months ago, I went back to the library, and the small oak door with the ancient handle was there, right where it used to be. My evening walk has brought me past that library every day since, but I haven't gone inside. Maybe tonight I will. I'm frightened to die, yes, but lately, I've been even more frightened to keep living. That old man was right. My road hasn't been easy, and I doubt it will get any easier. Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie. He promised relief. Refuge, he said. Was he right about that, too? There's only one way to find out. After all, I still know where to find him.